or consensus. So we don't want to have any one-off goals out there that aren't fully supported by the council. Again, the advantage of having a facilitator is so that everybody on the council, including the mayor, can participate. So I just asked, so I know who wants to chime in and jump in the conversation. Just raise your hands and we'll avoid any interruptions. I'll try to call on you as I see your hands come up. Let's see, no personal attacks. Assume positive intent. You guys all run for these positions to do good for your community. So that's our focus tonight. And just know that we're bringing those positive intentions into our work. Open communication. So if, make sure you're being upfront, honest about any feelings, and limit any distractions. I know we all have our tech in front of us, including myself. So I've tried to silence it, put it on airplane mode. So just nothing popping up that gets me off track. And then we get out of this what we put into it. So participate, engage. Are we all good with that? Do we need to add anything else to the list? Feel like that'll get us to the end game tonight? Yes, Councillor Spoon.
I'd like some clarity on what was left over, because I feel like there were clear items that were left over that need to be addressed tonight, and this feels very vague. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we're gonna, yep, you're leading us right into our next piece of the agenda is to just talk about kind of a recap of what happened last time. So last time, just process-wise, we started with setting intentions, kind of getting centered around the vision. We talked about progress and accomplishments, and then we did the context review. Remember that big crazy map of all the challenges and opportunities. And then we mapped out some ideas for the goals. So there are a few remaining ideas. I'm going to jump down to that in a second. Today, we're going to pick back up with that and try to, I took all the notes from last time and tried to put them into a spreadsheet to provide some clarification and a starting point for tonight. And so I want to pick up with that part of the process. And then once we can get the clarity around the goals and the actions, then talk about what implementation is going to look like and progress reporting. So on that note, I put all of those ideas that we mapped out the last time into this graphic here. And so we ended up with the 5 different focus areas, one around engagement and communications, one around promoting financial sustainability, aligning resources to address future community growth, planning a transportation system that eases the impacts of community growth, and developing a more robust parks and recreation program aligned with the needs identified in the Parks Master Plan. Under each of those categories, you guys talked about several strategies. Some of those I have in my notes that we need to have some more discussion on to get some clarity, and you guys may also have some points of clarification. And then Councillor Spoon, I think this might be what you're referring to. There were a few other ideas that were left out there that we didn't get a chance to touch on that night or that day. So one of those stray items out there were talking about a consultant for emergency management structure and plan, the mayoral powers versus council powers, and then a discussion of committee liaison roles and the appointment process. So I've got those noted out there as items we'll need to check in on. Any questions so far about where we were from last time? The one other item, just to remind you of kind of the reasoning for doing this exercise is that, as you recall, the council manager form of government, there's these specific roles that are in there. And one of those being on the policy side, setting goals, priorities, and direction, because that allows your staff to take that and align it with resources. So you guys are getting ready to go into your budget process. And so just reminding you that in order for this system to work well and for you to really provide great value to your taxpayers, because we know that if we don't have clear direction, we don't know how we're spending resources. And so we want to make sure that the staff has that clear direction to be able to spend wisely and spend according to your goals and priorities. So that's what we're here doing tonight. So as a council, the expectations are, you guys have authority to act as a body, to make some decisions, ask good questions. So that's what we're doing. We ready for this? Okay. So the goal refinement process, one more thing I'll just mention before we get into that. So we're going to review what we have right now. I want you guys to, again, to try and reflect back to that context if you can. We've already identified the focus areas. And so now I want you guys to just take a look and propose some ideas for refinement. I want to finish just a point of clarification on the process with what we have, because the other items that are out there, I think, are a separate conversation outside of goals, unless there's somebody that disagrees on how we move through that. Councillor Spoon?
I don't feel like they're outside of goals. I think they're an important part of conversation about how the structure exists. So I think we need to address them before we address everything else. The liaison appointments, the powers of mayor versus council.
Well, and what I'm hesitant in hearing you is that you're saying that that's going to be put to the end of this meeting. And we did that last time and you never got around to those points.
We can start with it. I want to make sure, again, that staff at least has the goals, and I think you guys are almost there. And so I wanted to finish my thinking in structuring the agenda was that we finish that part of the work, because you mentioned this is kind of a structural conversation. And I think it comes back kind of to this conversation around the role of council, and it kind of gets into roles and responsibilities. And so I wanted to follow up with that. That was my intention the last time during the process, but I also understand that there's hesitation that we might not get to it. But I do feel like we're in the home stretch with the goals and actions, and then get back to the structural conversation.
I do see what you're saying, but I think that the conversation about mayoral roles versus council roles and liaison appointments and all of that actually plays into the larger structure of the goals we're setting for staff. Mm-hmm. So I think that they are intertwined in a way where we cannot address them separately. We need to address the stuff that was left behind last time first. Okay. And that will actually be a part of then how staff is directed and what we do next. To me, knowing mayoral roles versus council roles plays into direction to staff largely. Liaison appointments also does. So for me, they cannot be separated, and we need to address what was left behind last time before we address the bigger picture. I don't know if I'm alone in that, if anyone else feels strongly, but to me, they are not separate issues. They are combined.
No, I don't think that they're separate. I do think that they are very interrelated, but we can start with that. That's fine.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I'm gonna ask a question. So how is the liaison role piece and the structural piece tied to this?
More largely, there are decisions we make as a council that are impacted by what the role of the mayor is and what the role of council is, what the liaison roles are and what they aren't, and how the appointments are made. That actually plays into some of the larger pictures that we're talking about. So to me, they are married in a way that we may as well address them before instead of addressing them separately. Let's just address this other issue we were talking about before. If there are places that they intertwine or they don't, that will play out on its own. But there's no reason to avoid having the conversation first. We may as well have that conversation first. And if it's because there are places where I think it's pertinent, right?
For example.
And maybe places. So for example, I think when it comes to current goals, there is a pertinent question about the role of the mayor versus the role of council, and the way in which certain things are determined or not determined. So to me, there's no reason to avoid having that conversation first. We may as well have that conversation. But I don't see a reason to have that conversation second. I don't see a reason to have that conversation second frequently.
I want to get back to kind of the agenda, and we did leave these items out there on the chart the last time. And so let's just finish up. They were part of the conversation, and then we'll get back into the refinement process. That was the direction we were headed last time. I think what happened with having to break it into 2 meetings was that I already had a chance to review all your notes and put some refinement thoughts together. And anyhow, it's fine to do it this way. We're still going to get to the goals. I think for the most effective way to move through this conversation, let's put some time constraints on it and put some structure around it, because I think that there's probably some passion behind it. And I want to give everybody a chance to weigh in. And similar is what we would do in a public comment period. I think let's give each person 3 minutes to kind of state their position, concerns, opportunities, and just let's start there. I'm not saying that's going to shut it down after we shut down the comments, but I want to get everybody a chance to share their perspective on this topic first before we move into more discussion. So I want this to be productive, and I want you guys to be able to move through it in a really civil way. So is everybody okay with starting with this approach, giving each of you 3 minutes to share perception or your perspective on it, and then we'll open up discussion and dialogue from there. Councillor Spoon?
I don't disagree with it. I just think if someone has more to say afterwards, we should acknowledge it, because we have not treated any of the other topics this way. And I object to it being handled differently than any of the other topics we handled during goal setting. So if this works, if this ends up working and everyone has 3 minutes and we can resolve it, fine. But I kind of object to treating it differently than every other topic, because it was of equal importance to many of us, the majority of us, during the previous meeting. And so I don't want to treat it differently than we treated any other topic.
Again, I just am going to rely on best practices. And when there's a topic like this that has a lot of passion behind it and it has the potential for some conflict, I put certain rules around it. And that's because we have till 9 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we get to the outcome. So if you're game to try it, 3 minutes each, and then we'll open it up for dialogue. I'll call on you, but again, I'm going to be really strong about enforcing the ground rules. We're not going to interrupt each other. We're not going to do personal attacks. I'm going to call on each of you until we can move through this conversation and hopefully get to the outcomes. Are we okay with that?
Sounds great.
Okay. So I'm just going to, Councillor Spoon, since this was the item that it was for, I believe, from your post on the board. So why don't you start? I'm going to run the timer on here.
Can you run it so I can see it?
Yeah, I can zoom in on this. Give me just a second. I'll restart it, and can you see it? Can you see that?
Yeah, will you restart it?
Yeah, I'll restart it. Great. I just want to make sure that you can see it. Stop. Okay. All right, go ahead.
So in Canby, we have a weak mayor system, which means that the mayor has no authority outside of the authority assigned by council in the charter. The charter is very clear that the mayor has very few responsibilities. Among those is that they can sign records of the proceedings. They have no veto power, in fact. They vote in the case of a tie. They can handle decorum and, quote, the order of business, which in my opinion does not actually say that he has the right to say what the business is, just the order of the business as it's assigned. However, it's my opinion that the mayor has usurped some additional authority outside of the charter in the last several years. And among those is assigning the liaison duties, which the charter does not say he gets to assign a liaison duty. The charter does reference the liaison in the case specifically of the planning commission, but never authorizes the mayor to assign who the liaison is. So in the case that the charter actually says, outside of anything defined by the charter, the council has total authority. So the charter does say that liaisons exist, but the charter never gives the mayor the authority to decide who the liaisons are for what particular authority. So in my opinion, it is a violation of the charter for the mayor to assign liaison authorities. It's up to the council, because the charter says anything not explicitly assigned to the mayor belongs to council. So in that case, I think that the liaison duties belong to council to assign. In addition to that, I actually believe that the charter says that the mayor has the right to decide the order of business, but that does not give them the determination of what the business is, just the order in which it's handled. So I think council has more authority to determine what the business is than has been usurped in previous years. So in my opinion, we need to decide who determines what the liaison appointments are, because the charter does not give that power to the mayor, though it identifies that liaisons exist. And also who determines what the business is, even if the mayor determines the order of business. there's no council authority, there's no charter authority to say that the mayor is the only one to determine what the business of council is. That council has the authority to determine what their business is, and the mayor can decide what order that happens in, perhaps, but the council actually holds the authority to determine what the business is. To me, those are very important decisions that impact everything else, and they're all defined clearly, in my opinion, by the charter. And that there's been some agency taken in determining what the mayor's authority is, but I think that it's been outside of the agency of charter.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spoon. Councillor Parker, I'll restart my timer here.
Well, I'm probably not even going to need 3 minutes. For me, it evolves around Article 3 of the Charter, which is that all power resides with the council. And in talking to former mayors Melody Thompson and Scott Taylor, both of them said that their practice was to follow the charter and to have the council decide among themselves. And when I asked Melody, I said, well, what did you do if there was a dispute? She said, I'd tell them to go back and try again. So I do think that some effort needs to be played here to clarify that role. Also, one of the structural issues that we keep bumping into from time to time is how to get things on the agenda. We seem to be getting different over the past 10 years. We've had different answers of that it takes two members of council to request something. At times it's been 3 members of council. So we've got a situation where what is the path for council members to bring items to get on the agenda? So that's all I had tonight.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Hensley.
I am asking to defer to Councillor Barwick for a moment because I'm trying to look something up and I don't want to use my 3 minutes doing that.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's see. Well, I'm kind of going around. Mayor, do you want to weigh in? Do you want to take this time?
I'd rather wait, seeing as how it's questioning.
Whether he has a role in this conversation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Everybody has a role in the
Sure.
conversation. Okay,
So
Councillor Barwick.
I would prefer to hold
Can you bring in
Go ahead.
back in, right?
Yeah, I won't use all the time either. I'm cool with clarifying everything. I think that it needs to be out there, but it just, this is getting so ridiculous. It feels to me like this is just a personal attack on the mayor himself. We've been doing it this way for many, many years. It's been this way the entire time I've been on council. It was like this before I was on council. So I don't know what the frustration is or the anger towards the mayor. But it's just getting very frustrating to be a part of this council that just is constantly in argument and strife with each other. And so if clarifying it will make people happy and make this job fun again, cool, let's do it. But I'm honestly, we're the laughing stock of the metro area right now, and it's really embarrassing. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Councillor Barwick. We're going to stop. Can we just, there's like a side conversation kind of happening up here. I realize you guys are looking.
I'm trying to
for
find
documents.
something. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to distract you.
Apologies. It's distracting.
Can I have a point of order?
The point of order is we're going to keep moving through the process. We agreed to it up front. So I want to stick to it. All right, Councillor Bajoran, let me stop this and restart just in fairness to everybody. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not going to use my 3 minutes either, but plain and simple, the city charter exists for a reason. And I think we need to just get back to how everything is supposed to be done. If there's confusion on that, we need to clarify it, plain and simple. So let's get past that, get it done, figure it out.
All right, Councillor Hensley, are you?
Well, thank you for accommodating me trying to look up the actual verbiage. Because I wanted to actually quote the exact verbiage, but I'm not able to find it at this quick moment here. Because I didn't know this was going to come up. But I will say that the roles of the councilors and the council president and the mayor are clearly defined in the charter already, so we don't need to hash those out. And as far as liaison assignments go, Perhaps Melody Thompson and Scott Taylor did it a different way, but I also served under Mayor Randy Carson, and he did it this way. And I think that in the last 10 years, Brian has done a very good job of including all of the counselors in the conversation of, he goes to us and asks us, what roles would you like? And he takes that information and he basically says, okay, this one wants this one, this one wants that one. And he tries to make everybody happy in what role that they're serving in. And I think he's done a good job in that. We're a body of 6 counselors. You can't please everybody with all their assignments, because some, you're going to have 2 or 3 people that might want the same assignment. So also days of the week play in and that kind of thing. So I think he's done a good job of assigning those roles. I think that it would be a much longer conversation if we were all sitting here hashing it out. I think that the way he's handled it and the way Mayor Carson handled it has worked lovely. It's literally been the last year or 2 that there's been an issue. Very true. And I have nothing else to say. And we're not supposed to interrupt each other.
Yeah, let's just stick with the rules. All right, Mayor, let me start this over and give you the same 3 minutes before we open it up for more dialogue. I also just will warn you after this, I have a question for staff before we move into the next part of this conversation. So, all right, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it under 3. So I find this piece here to be, I think Councillor Varwick said, I'm not sure it's laid out, like why we're going through this necessarily. The liaison positions, when we've had an election year, I have sat down with every councillor at the turn of a council and had dialogue about what liaison roles they may or may not be interested in. The last time I had that conversation, I would have brought my notes because I have looked it up because Councillor Spoon brought it up in a meeting that I had with her and Councillor Parker and Councillor Bangs with city staff. Because oftentimes, and I can go back almost specifically to the last time, where the only thing that stands out to me in terms of what people may or may not have wanted was I had 3 councillors that wanted to be the park liaison. I didn't have anyone, I did have Councillor Varwig express interest in being the liaison of the Planning Commission at the time. He was the only one that expressed interest in being the liaison of the Planning Commission. There have been accusations of loading important committees with, conservatives. That's been lobbed out there. I try to mitigate and give people their areas of interest. Councillor Parker has been bike and ped because that's been something that he has been passionate about, and that has been a continued ask. There have been times where he has said, however you see fit, I will serve. And that's what I have done. If that's not how you want to have that, that's fine. But to sit here and go through this process in this fashion for 10 years and now have a problem with it, it's perplexing to me in that regards. When it's just been brought up that there's a quote unquote issue with it within the last couple of months. I have no problem letting the council decide on what that was. And a beef that's not been brought up that I will bring up was that, I appointed myself as the park liaison because I had 3 city councilors that wanted to be the park liaison. And so I took it because I knew that it was going to end up being we'll say a squabble over that piece of it. And frankly, I was asked by members of the park board to be the liaison. So that's why I took that one liaison role. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, I have no problem here after the beginning of the year. If we want to go back to let the council hash out liaison roles, that is totally fine by me. Thank you.
That was the 3 minutes there. So question for staff. I'm working with a lot of cities where questions come up about what's in the charter versus what's not in the charter. Typically there are council rules of sorts that help to clarify. That's typically anything that's not is spelled out in the charter is addressed by a set of council rules. And so do you guys have anything in your council rules that defines these roles?
Yeah, I have it
procedures?
from our policies and operating guidelines for the City of Canby dated December 2018, which is our most current guidelines. On page 14, we have two headings down. It says council liaisons. It says council liaisons are selected on an annual basis. The designation is flexible based upon the needs of the council. Liaisons are encouraged to attend committee meetings on a regular basis. Liaisons will report back to the council on committee activities not included in the committee minutes. Liaisons are not voting members of the committees. Liaisons will clarify personal opinion and differentiate that from council opinion. And then that is all it says.
Okay, so it doesn't spell out specifically anything. What was the other?
Well, it does say just selected on an annual basis.
Yeah. So,
and that it's just based upon needs as well as interests.
and the other issue that's coming up in this, in everybody's everybody's sharing was around setting the council agenda. Is there anything in there that references the policies or procedures around that?
Well, the mayor sets the agenda of the meetings, right? The order of business.
Yeah, what I heard was the order of business.
Yeah.
How do items get on the agenda? And typically what I see in many other cities that is spelled out in their council rules or whatever you guys call it here, is that it takes the majority of the council to decide an order of business that's going to be on an agenda. But it's typically spelled out more in those documents. So I don't know if you guys have anything.
Well, the other piece of our charter that kind of interplays with this is that any three councilors can basically hold a special meeting, even if it isn't, or demand the attendance at a special meeting to discuss a topic. So presumably that power exists because it doesn't take a full quorum to have a special meeting about a topic, meaning that any three then could presumably, if they can order a special meeting, they should be able to order a topic be on the agenda. That's the only other interplay that seems to be in there.
Okay. All right, let's open up for dialogue. I saw Councillor Spoon's hand first and then Mayor Hodson.
I want to address a couple of things. Number one is that we don't really have a standard for how something gets on the agenda. We're just frequently told the mayor handles the order of business, but never how that business is determined. So that needs to be decided. Also, I'd like to point out that Councillor Bajoran, Councillor Parker, and I have only talked about what the charter is. I'm not sure how it got so political because this topic has come up a number of times in my 5 years on council. I'm specifically talking about what the charter says, and the charter does not give the mayor the authority to determine liaison appointments, but Chapter 3, Section 1 says, except as this charter provides otherwise, all powers of the city shall be vested in the council. So to me, it's not political. It's not, I don't care. Maybe the mayor's done a good job. Maybe he hasn't. That's an individual determination. That's not what this is about. I'm not making a determination on the quality of the job the mayor has done. I'm only trying to get back to the roots of what the charter says, because that should be the guiding document for our government. I have not claimed the mayor did a bad job. That's not something I'm saying. I'm only trying to get back to the governing document, which says, other than what is said in this charter, council has all power. And the charter does not give the mayor authority to determine who attends what meeting or who has what liaison appointment or who is our representative at C4. None of that is determined by the mayor. The charter specifically gives that power to council. So that's what I want to get back to. I'm not saying the mayor did a bad job. I'm not saying the mayor did a great job. That's not what this is about. It's about getting back to what the actual policy and procedure of council should be, and charter determines that. And I don't think Councillor Bajoran, Councillor Parker, or I said anything about the job of what the mayor did, whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether it was political or not. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the governing document and what that determines.
Yeah, I heard from just a majority up here that you guys just want some clarification on how to do it. I think I even heard that in the mayor's comments of let's just get some clarification and be able to move forward. So Mayor Hodson, what did you want to add to the?
No, I mean, I'll just go back to, so first piece of just the liaison piece. I mean, part of that conversation that I would have after an election time, to have that conversation was to figure out who wanted what and help to have that dialogue. My job as the mayor is to facilitate our twice a month meetings or 3 times a month meetings. And so there's nothing wrong, I don't believe, to have that conversation and come in and help steer that piece. And I believe if you go back and watch the tapes of those meetings, I think once the conversation has ended, everyone has been in agreement on what their liaison roles were. There wasn't any pushback on who had what or when. That's, again, if we want to honor the charter, fine. Then by all means, then great. Regarding agendas and what gets on there, part of my job also is to count votes. If I think something isn't going to, if something is brought forward and I don't think it's going to be something that's going to make it on the dais, or that it's going to be I take that into consideration. Does that my only deciding factor? No. I do have conversation with the city manager. We meet every week and we talk about what's going on in the city and we determine agenda pieces. And there are things that we don't put on the agenda because we're already working on it, or it's a section of something that's already being addressed. And so it's coming up. So, any ideas and things, I do entertain all the suggestions that come in. Do they always end up on an agenda, or is it going to be something that's going to be in a work session coming up? I take that into consideration. So again, if it's clarification that we seek here tonight on some of these process and standards, then let's iron them out.
Okay, that's what we're doing. Great. Councillor Hensley.
Thank you. He kind of touched on some of it. My thoughts were the agenda pieces. I never looked at it as the mayor had sole authority of the agenda, because I know that most of what is on our agenda, probably 90% of what ends up on the agenda, is the day-to-day business of things that Scott needs to have us approve to get the business of the city done. So as far as what goes on the agenda, that's kind of Scott's job in conjunction with the mayor. And the mayor approves the order of business per se. And back to the liaison pieces, for the last dozen years at least, I know of, that we've handled it the way we've been handling it, with the way that Mayor Hodson handles it, with no problems. And yeah, maybe the power lies with the council, but we've kind of given him the power to facilitate that role assignment by letting him do it the way he's been doing it. And I think he's done a good job, but it's within our authority to say, Mayor, do this. And I think we kind of have by just having it be the way it's been.
Councillor Parker. Thanks, Councillor Hensley.
So Tracy, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, is that we have kind of officially delegated our authority to the mayor on this?
By not stating we wanted it a different way. Yeah.
So that's why we're having this discussion. See, we only have these retreats, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 years.
Did not bring umbrellas.
And so
All right, let's hold on.
Sorry.
Side conversation.
Sorry.
Councillor Parker has the floor, so let's hear
are
it
you
out.
done?
I'm sorry. I was just making a joke about my umbrellas. I apologize.
Never mind.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Parker. All right.
I apologized. I'm sorry.
Let's move on, please.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that, well, on the topic of the agenda, it sounds like you guys have some procedures in place that maybe, just clarifying it tonight, that if 3 people want an item on the agenda, if 3 members of the council want to see an item on the agenda, that they can share that at the meeting or with the city manager, and that item can be placed on an agenda. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that's the de facto, result of the idea that any three members could order a meeting and compel everyone else to be there to discuss something. So it would seem more efficient than just having to order a special meeting. So I mean that, and I would say the one piece about the business or the order of business does say in accordance with the rules of the council. So I mean, I think that is there's supposed to be the interplay between what the rules of the council are, and you could make rules. I mean, I keep pulling up a document that's from December 2018. You guys could change the rules, and then the order of business has to be done under the rules. So, and that might be a discussion for a different day. But I mean, currently we have a charter that says if three people want, they can order a special meeting. So you could skip that special meeting, just put it on the agenda.
I don't know if you guys have looked at it recently, but the League of Oregon Cities, I can't recall when it came out. I want to say it was 2019, because a lot of elected bodies have, things have changed. Technology has changed. So I wouldn't be surprised if these rules get updated yet again. But they put out a model or a template, if you will, of council rules and for cities who needed to make updates to those. And so you could refer to the draft that the League of Oregon Cities put together. I know a lot of cities I worked with last year were having similar conversations and said, we need to make an update of our council rules to be consistent and with some of the, practices being used in other cities around the state, because we just haven't looked at them in a long time. So a recommendation could be that you guys direct staff to take a look at those and present some options for clarifying your council rules based on tonight's conversation, focusing on your committee liaison process. And because this is something that cities do all over the state, and there's some good practices out there for doing it to avoid these, having to have lengthy discussions about it. So would you guys be in favor of having your team bring some recommendations back to just add a little more clarity to your process in updating your council rules?
I think that's a great action item to include in tonight's pieces, so that, when we approve the goals and whatnot and action steps, I think that would be,
okay.
In my opinion, I think that'd be prudent to do.
Any other comments or questions about that? Councillor Spoon, does this address the concerns that you had in bringing this one forward?
It does. Largely, I'd like some clarity on liaison roles, what the purpose of liaison appointments are, but then also how something gets brought to the agenda, because we've had a lot of confusion about that. It's been a frustrating process for the last few years of something wanted to come to the agenda, how that happened, and whether or not it made the agenda. So some clarity on that, I think, would be really helpful for the group.
Okay.
I don't think all of us have felt any agency in bringing anything to the agenda.
Well, hopefully this clarification in this process will help to address that, and you guys can move forward and work on the other goals that we were talking about. Good? Okay, good. See, that wasn't so bad. All right, let's move back to, the one other outstanding item, I don't want to forget about it, was around, it didn't fit neatly into any of the other categories, at least from my initial attempt at organizing these, but maybe it does. But it was the one about emergency management and thinking about the structure, the plan. And so it was the only other outstanding item that we didn't deal with last time. Any thoughts on that?
Councillor Bajor's baby.
And maybe Councillor Bajor, before you weigh in on it, maybe staff can give us kind of a quick update of what currently exists for emergency management, just to provide a little context.
Well, we do have an emergency management plan. I think it's in need of being updated and reviewed and updated. Fire chief is here tonight. I've been talking with him regularly about our coordination in the community. Our police chief Tro and other school district, our new superintendent. We did an exercise somewhat recently, even with them that was really productive. But I think it is in need of our emergency management plan is in need of being reviewed. This might be jumping ahead to sort of an action item here, but I had planned to propose in our upcoming budget process a consultant that we hire a consultant, and we put the money in the budget to bring in somebody who is an expert in reviewing and working with the community to revise its emergency management plan, and we would engage all the proper stakeholders, some of those I just mentioned. So that is already on my mind as your administrator, just so you know. And as far as I'm concerned, I was going to bring you a proposal during the budget process, perhaps even through use of our ARPA funding, which I think it qualifies for. So.
Okay. Thanks for providing that context. Councillor Bajorn, this was something that you raised at the last meeting. So any other comments you want to make about this item?
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is something that we do need to work on. My thought process from this came from the fact that during the ice storm, I think our response, while it was coordinated, could have been a lot better. And I think the city probably felt that. And as a city that is growing, I think we owe it to all our citizens to get a round turn on that, get a little bit more energy behind it, and improve how we respond to those kinds of major emergencies, so that the city knows that we have their back. That's it.
Any other comments from the council on this? Councillor Spoon?
Just that I agree with Councillor Bajorn. I think that his insight on this with his background in emergency management and as a Coast Guard, in the Coast Guard gives us a good insight that maybe we could do some better work here, and we have an opportunity with funds that we haven't had available to us previously to make some groundwork done here that we couldn't have previously done. So thank you, Councillor Bajorn.
Yeah, Mayor Hodson.
Thank you. I'm all for absolutely. I think reviewing our emergency management plan on an annual basis is prudent. I mean, I think it's an important piece. I have to do that for my business and what I do. I think we have a very capable team in Chief Davis and Chief Tro and our Public Works Director, Jerry Nelzine, and our city staff. I think I thought things were handled very well during the ice storm. I'm not the professional. I get it. I really hesitate on saying that we didn't do well. I think our city did very well in handling that situation and the aftermath after that.
Okay, any other comments from the council on wanting to add this? It sounds like there's already a budget proposal coming forward. What about thoughts? Do you guys, is it important to include this as a council goal or as an action and under one of the goals? I'm hearing that you guys want to do some work on it.
It's clearly a goal,
Mayor
but
Hodson's
it looks like
hand
he's
first.
already on it, so.
I think that it sounds like to me, again, like I just said, having our emergency plan for our city is an important piece for anything. It could be ice storms that we've had. We had the fires we've had in years past. We've had flooding. Each of those things require a whole different, some different planning, but in tactics within the same piece. So I think those are worthwhile things to be visiting and taking a look at. I think that's just standard operating procedure and operations of any organization. I think we have the players in place. It sounds like Scott's already been thinking about it in terms of, making this a budgetary item. So to me, it seems like, if it's a standalone thing, then it's a standalone goal that we get there to revisit that and take a look at it. Or to me, it's an action item, perhaps under, under financial sustainability or, what's the blue category there, Sarah?
I know. I was kind of thinking about that one too. Engagement and communications.
Yeah, I think it could go.
Yeah.
If it's an action, if we make it an actionable item versus a standalone, it could be one of those items in one of those two bubbles. Just my opinion.
Okay. Councillor Spoon?
Yeah, I think there's some defensiveness that surprises me because I didn't take that Councillor Bajoran thought that we failed as a city, more that it was an indicator that there are things ahead of us that we have not planned for. And that this was a good opportunity to stand back and say like, oh, we don't have a city staff member that is an emergency management like specialist. That's not what their degree or background is in. So an opportunity to look to city staff and say, can we bring a consultant in where that is their area of expertise and that's what they've studied? This is a good time to do that. So I'm not sure why, and I don't want to speak for Councillor Bajoran, but I did not interpret it as him saying that we did a bad job or we didn't do everything right. More as like, oh, this is an opportunity for us to stand back and say, what else have not we prepared for? And how can we do that? And since staff says there's a budget opportunity to do this, it would be a good time to do it.
Councillor Bajoran?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah Spoon. Councillor Spoon, I'm sorry. This is just kind of irritating because, yeah, I was not in any way trying to say that we did not do a good enough job. Okay. Again, I come from a background where even at the lowest level, we all had contingencies upon contingencies for every eventuality, even if it never happened. And so looking at how, our responses have been to like the fires, for example, the ice storms, COVID, a lot of our responses have been good and could arguably just be better. That's it. All I'm saying is that there are always gaps. No one ever does anything perfectly. And, obviously, we've got good department heads that do their job. Our chief of fire, chief of police, they do a great job. Jerry Nelzine over at Public Works does an outstanding job. I mean, we know this. We know we have great people that do their jobs. It's an effort to hold them together even greater, and help them do their jobs more efficiently, more quickly, and be able to support the city even better in their capacities. That's it.
Okay, so I just think, Councillor Parker, please.
Well, I think we did find some things that we could have done better. We did put some wear and tear on some of our employees. Didn't have sleeping facilities for people who were working 24-hour shifts. Didn't have enough generators. Didn't have enough oil in reserve, that sort of thing. So I'm pleased the appearance was that it went smoothly, but in talking to some of the folks that were doing the job, I think that there are ways that we can help them do their job. The other thing, and I'm sorry we got off liaison so quickly because there was actually another chapter I wanted to get into, but it affects this one as well. And the idea of what is a liaison for? Is it to provide communication, coordination, and policy support for a particular area? And my question would be, for example, with emergency management, of a liaison report connection for that, to be able to keep the council informed on this, to be able to be an advocate for policy and budgetary items. Again, back to the conversation we did not have. Frankly, I think we've got some liaison assignments that don't necessarily make sense. And I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk about that as a whole, but I guess that's for another time. But the check mark on this one is that this certainly seems like something where one member of the council, it would be helpful for them to have the type of depth that we have with CUB, with the planning department, with parks, that sort of thing. So not all of us can be experts on everything, but the idea of being able to parcel these things out seems like a worthy discussion.
So I captured this in there just kind of as a note for staff as well as they think through kind of going back to that, looking at the LOC template to also include some recommendations on how to better define those liaison roles. And then in this particular action item that you guys are coming up with, I think we need to decide where it goes in the realm of goals, but making sure that I've got some notes to help inform staff on how to move it forward. Yes, Mayor Hodson.
Thank you. Councilor Jordan, I thank you for clarifying your comment. I'm sorry if I misunderstood that, where you were coming from on that. So I thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Well, so I kind of just put this, some language to this up here as far as leverage ARPA funds to update the city's emergency management plan, knowing that you guys will talk about the liaison role in that and engage all the appropriate stakeholders, hiring a consultant to do that. That's going to come forward, it sounds like, in your budget process, but putting it up here as an action under one of the goals. And again, I just kind of go back and forth with, you know, that it could go under engagement and communications. It could also, or it could go under financial sustainability. I kind of lean towards engagement and communications, but I don't know if anybody has a preference on where it shows up. Any preference? It does, and we could link it in both.
That would be good because the rocket funds are my
Okay.
thing, so I would like to see that going forward, rocket funds not there, it's the becomes program. Are we going to do that? So it should, my idea should be more focused.
Yeah, we can link that in both. That's not at all unusual for cities to put actions in two goal areas when it's related like that. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. How are we on time? Almost to 7. So let's just go through each of these areas and make sure. So the bubble in the center here, this is what reflects the conversation we had around the overarching outcome and what you want to achieve. So I see that as the goal language and what we're moving towards. And then over here, these are the actions that would support that goal just based on the conversation we had during the last meeting. So some of these, I feel like I need some additional direction from the council on. Some of them feel a little vague and some of them feel like they're almost there and provide specific direction. As we move through each of these, I'm also going to check in with staff to make sure, because they will ultimately be the ones who have to carry it forward and implement it and give direction in the organization. So I'm going to check in with them as well to see where they feel like they might need some more direction. So let's start with the ones around growth, because there's quite a few. Oops. Okay. It's really weird to hear yourself talk. Okay. Let's start with growth. There's quite a few here in this one. And so the overarching outcome here was to align resources to address future community growth. And some of the actions to support that came up were to conduct an economic needs analysis, update the city's development code, a housing needs analysis, expand downtown housing opportunities, expand the Canby area transit circulator routes, look at an urban growth boundary expansion, Area J, Walnut master planning. That was a note I had. I feel like I need a little more direction on what that meant. And then update the city's comprehensive plan, which was a pretty big one, significant one that encompassed a lot of things. So those were the actions I had. Any staff, let's ask you first where you feel like you need more direction before we get all that direction from the council. And some of these I understand are also underway already.
Right. That was one of my comments. As far as the specifics of those, they're pretty straightforward. I think expand downtown housing opportunities might be something that's a little bit broad and vague. I don't know if there's any more clarity we might get around that. That's a little bit more tangible. And then just a bigger, I'll wait until you type so you can have to.
Okay, so more direction on this one.
Yeah, or
and then which are the ones that are, I want to know which ones are underway already.
Okay. Economic needs analysis.
Okay, I'll just put a star next to that to indicate that that's already underway.
And when we say underway, that could mean any different range of like, we're just having kind of, kicking off processes to, we might be already in something, but city development, updating the city's code. We're beginning that process. Housing needs analysis. We're getting close to kicking that off.
Yeah, if it's already budgeted or it's already started in some capacity.
Yeah, circulator route, thank you.
This is already underway.
Process, yeah. Just talked to our transit director today about that. Urban growth boundary expansion, that's probably something we haven't really begun, and that's going to be driven, I think, somewhat by these other processes like comprehensive plan. The Area J master planning, Joe, maybe you can help me answer that one a little bit. I don't know that it's kind of underway because that's sort of up to the landowners, right?
Yes, the Area J is an area of special interest in our comprehensive plan. It's one of the older parts of our comprehensive plan document, and because we've done some updates to it, but that has never really been updated. And so it simply said that it's going to have mixed residential in the whole area. So that in and of itself wasn't helpful to know whether or not it was supposed to be R1 or R1.5 or even R2. Currently the 3 landowners that are probably going to annex in first, that might own about 30% of the land out there, they have an attorney and they are going to develop the developed concept plan that you need to do in order to, because it's an area of special interest. So the DCP, the development concept plan, is being worked on by the people who are planning to annex first. They have to vet that through all the neighbors, but the notion is, they're paying to annex first, and they're paying the big heave to get it past there, so they get kind of first bite at that apple if they want it. And so they're going to come in, I think, under that mixed residential with just mostly R1 and R1.5.
When do you think that's going to happen?
Pretty soon, because they were trying to get assurances that we would finish Walnut so that they would be shovel ready at the same time that they have access to their land. So they
Like
and
within
it's
a year,
or sooner.
within a few months.
Well, maybe like 8 months, maybe is
Okay.
I guess. Now, but the notion there is then the council will want to look in a greater way, and hopefully we'll get our comprehensive plan going around there, because clearly that highway commercial corridor that we have along 99E has an overlay. And I know Councillor Parker's even mentioned this in session before about continuing that highway overlay, because it seems to make sense, and that's more commercial. And then of course usually have higher density near that commercial area, and then you kind of taper down from there. So I think we're going to have applicants coming in and saying this is a development concept plan pretty soon, but I think it's going to kind of coincide hopefully with a little bit more of the comprehensive plan, and maybe we'll have to lean on our planning director to kind of prognosticate a little bit, because I don't think we just went out to have people tell us how much our comprehensive plan probably will cost. So I think we're paying about $15,000 to find out how much that bigger plan is going to cost. So those steps are on the way. You can put a little asterisk by that, but we might be not quite perfectly aligned with those two things. But there are landowners looking to annex, and they have to do a development concept plan first. So I think you're going to see that pretty soon.
Just the last piece I was going to add to your question, Sarah, was with some of these items, and it might be when we get into the other goals and the action items as well, it might be the same kind of a theme, which is just, I think it's worth acknowledging that some of these things are going to be shorter term achievable objectives or action items, and then some of them are going to take a few, up to a few years, or certainly beyond. Like if this is goal setting for the current year, or we might initiate something, but it's going to take beyond that. So I don't know how we want to acknowledge that, so that we're not setting up staff, and I know council doesn't want to set us up to not succeed either, that we're setting up a realistic timeline on these. Perhaps we're going to get into that later, but I don't mean to.
Just to kind of give you guys a preview of what's to come. So we'll talk about what the implementation plan looks like, but typically what we do after we have clarification on the goals and the actions is I'll work with your staff team to put together some timelines around it and bring that back to the council for adoption. And typically those timelines, you have it somewhat flexible. It's, maybe it's 1 year or 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, and 5 years plus. And so the idea is that they start working on some of these things and scope the project accordingly, but they've got the direction they need to know what they need to work on. And then obviously there's for a comprehensive plan update. Yeah, the timeline's fairly lengthy. So.
Yeah, I thought that might be something you were going to address anyway. But I think this is a really great first example. And so several of these things, many of which you've just put an asterisk by, will actually lead to our comprehensive plan. So we need to do some of these things, and then that funnels us into information that will then support the work of our comp plan eventually. So it's all relatable, and it's kind of working towards that objective as well. So that's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Councillor Parker. Thank you. I'm sorry.
On the topic of goals to address our growth, I think one thing that's a bipartisan belief is that none of us are happy that the legislature took away our authority to have annexation votes. But during that session, the legislature did give us a tool, the inclusionary zoning, which most of the people on this council did not get a chance to participate in the discussion 8 years ago, which was mainly between me and then Councillor Rocha. My advocacy was that we take a look at it, and Councillor Rocha, coming into the council with expertise in housing, certainly, his position was let the market determine how much houses will cost in Canby. Well, I'm not satisfied 8 years later with that answer, which is $500,000 plus. So my ask tonight would be that the staff bring to council a review of what it would take to implement the inclusionary rule, and give an explanation to those of us who may have forgotten exactly what it does. But to me, it seems we can't look at growth. The number one complaint I get from citizens of Canby is about growth, and what are you going to do about it? And we have a tool out there that was only briefly examined, and it may not have legs still. But I don't know when the next time we'll be doing a goal setting like this, but probably the biggest failure of my council career was not getting the inclusionary zone as a tool for us to do something about the housing prices in Canby.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. I have this noted up here. Councillor Spoon.
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Parker. I'd be interested in getting a staff report on that and what that would look like for our community. And I think it's particularly timely because the state has basically come and said anything that's zoned R1 can now include a duplex. So I think that there's a number of timely conversations that are kind of aligned with that and what zoning looks like and what inclusionary zoning looks like and how that impacts our community. So I just want to back that thought and say that there's support to have a conversation about what inclusionary zoning and then this kind of upzoning law that's coming for us very recently looks like.
And I can say that will dovetail into the economic needs analysis and housing needs analysis, because we have to have tools, and that can be one of the tools in that toolbox, so that when you're down on certain types of housing, you open up the toolbox and use it. So,
other comments or questions on this one? On just growth in any of the growth topics, not just inclusionary zoning? I want to circle back to this one about expand downtown housing opportunities, but just to clarify, will there be, does this need to be a separate action item or just kind of maybe an addendum to the economic needs or housing needs analysis? But you guys are already bringing this information forward to the council as part of that?
I think it will be. If the council wanted to focus on this more specifically and leave that on the board or even have it as a subset of the housing needs analysis. But yeah, it will be part of that review.
Okay. Mayor Hodson?
Yeah, I think the expansion of downtown housing opportunities is, I think there's been conversation over the years about looking at some of the zoning pieces in our downtown and changing those to a greater density piece. I think that's been part of the conversation. It may end up just being a subset of the housing needs analysis, which both of those then feed into, even the housing needs analysis can run parallel and intersect with the economic needs analysis. Because a lot of that, I think, is as you build housing and you attract people to the city, that's going to have an economic impact, good and bad, or I should say good, bad, and indifferent. Right? So I think that expanding our downtown housing opportunities feeds into both of those, but I think it should rest under the housing needs piece.
Okay. So are you guys okay with putting some more specific language with this housing needs analysis to include the inclusionary zoning and then expanding downtown housing opportunities as part of that? You can put some language in that action to make sure that those things get elevated as part of that housing needs analysis. Councillor Spoon and then Councillor Parker.
I am, but I kind of think they're two separate things. Like the housing needs analysis is a specific consultative process that happens that helps us guide, and some of it is staff report. And I think that they're like conjoined at some places, but correct me if I'm wrong, they're kind of two separate. Like the housing needs analysis will not give us an action or a recommendation on inclusionary zoning, right? Like they're kind of two separate processes.
It will most likely include that in the toolbox that developers can use, because it's a statement about this is the type of housing you need, and these are the tools that the city's willing to provide to do that. And so when we did that almost to the finish line before, the toolbox is where we got jammed up because we didn't want it to write an open check. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's kind of how the plurality felt. And so if it gets put in that toolbox, the reason the state wants us to do it is because they want us to do something that's actually useful for development, so that all the missing middle and the different housing needs actually get addressed. But
correct me if I'm wrong, because what I was hoping for was a staff report long before the housing needs assessment was finished. Like I would like a staff report on what inclusionary zoning and upzoning looks like long before. It'll take a long time before the housing needs analysis is complete. So to me, I would like both and I don't want to speak for you, but that was what I was interpreting.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I don't want to wait for completion of a comprehensive plan to address this. We've got a housing crisis right now. And so I would like to see that as a discrete goal to be pulled apart and looked at. If no other than to have staff come back and say, this is what it's going to cost you to do this sort of thing. And in case I get hit by a bus as I walk out of here tonight, I do want to get this on the record. I'm not sure everybody remembers about the zoning that the city has on the southwest part of downtown. But we have been losing housing because at one point, the city thought it would be a good idea to allow for an expansion of our business district. Mm-hmm. So there's an overlay over that entire area. And we have been losing some houses over the last couple of years. Maybe we want that. Maybe we want to expand our business district, but it contradicts with the goal of trying to have affordable housing and walking city. So I just wanted to be able to capture that as something that I think needs to be reviewed. I like the idea of us being able to expand our downtown because we are landlocked, but it comes with a cost. So I want us to have that be an overt policy decision by this council or a future council on whether, in fact, we're willing to give up some of these houses in that neighborhood because we want to expand the number of businesses down there.
Okay, so I'm hearing to keep the inclusionary zoning as a separate item to come forward as a separate action under this larger goal of growth. And any dissent on that? So everybody,
No, I would
Councillor
agree
Hensley?
with Councillor Parker on turning houses into businesses. The north side has also examples, you know, the smaller little cottage type houses that we have down here downtown, perfect starter homes that would be semi-affordable for a family to get started, turn into businesses that fast. So we need to work with that and make them stay housing.
Okay. All right. Okay, so, and, oh, yes, Mayor Hodson.
Thanks. I hear what's being said, and I think that if in this, so Joe and Scott, I think a piece that also needs to be considered, and maybe that's what comes out of the housing needs analysis piece, is the density requirements that are put on us as well. So to kind of piggyback on the idea of what's been created here downtown on some of those, you know, that it's labeled and called as an overlay cottage commercial. So as those homes are bought and converted to businesses, they stay businesses. They don't go back to being homes. And so as the LCDC and the DLCD take on, and much of even our own housing code takes on the life of Metro and the state planning, density is a huge part of that. And so I think that we could be hard pressed in our conversation of changing that. We could run headlong into Metro and therefore state planning guidelines on housing in what would be considered a high density area. So not saying don't have the conversation. I just need us to be mindful and prepared that that's a real, I don't even want to say hurdle, because it's really, I think, potentially a cinder block roadblock that we could be running into when we look at the density piece. And so that may just be about a visioning aspect of, you know, is that cottage houses like that, or is it Dahlia building in terms of the development of housing in our downtown? I mean, that's a real conversation piece that we've got to have. So I'm all for having it. I'm just saying that I don't want us to get too far over our skis and then get ground up because, you know, we're locked out because of what the state has said is their density goals. Is that Joe? Is that I have Title IX in my head because that's not it. That's more about sports, but about school sports. But there's no, it's within the housing development code. There's
So are you saying section 8 or no?
No, never mind.
Oh, okay.
I'll
sorry.
come back to it. But
Okay.
it's like like chapter 10 of like there's a certain section within that gets referred to often at the Metro conversations about housing, that it meets this state level criteria that's been
Something.
something 10. I just don't remember the word of it. So just maybe something to look in. But again,
There's a mark.
And I know we're trying to move through the goals, so we don't want to get totally sidetracked.
Yeah, we're gonna get in the weeds.
no.
But yeah, I mean, there are even shorter term things, because I know you guys were asking for those, about the way in which our non-conforming use in a commercial zone, if you have a house there and you're grandfathered in, but then a bank won't loan to you because you're in a commercial zone. And if it ever burns down, you can't make a house again.
Right.
So, I mean, there are just tweaks that you can maybe try to make, but I'll research all that. And when we prioritize this, bring that information to you guys.
Okay, so what I'm hearing on this is, first, great job giving staff some more clear direction. The expanding downtown housing opportunities and thinking about increasing density is going to come forward in your housing needs analysis and some additional study on that. Yes. And then there's going to be a separate action for the piece around inclusionary zoning. Anything else on the, as far as actions to support this goal? Do we feel good about where this is?
Without getting too far into weeds, yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah, to give staff some general direction on what you want to see come forward.
It gives good guardrails, I think.
Good. Okay. You guys ready to move to the next one?
Yes.
You guys were pretty efficient. We moved through that in 20 minutes. That was the longest one. So, all right, let's tackle financial sustainability next. So, promote financial sustainability was the overarching outcome you talked about. Some of the actions to support that were assessing the city's reserve levels and balance savings and investments. So balancing that saving piece with spending to meet community needs, evaluating the city's fee structure, increasing engagement with the budget committee, using ARPA funds to recover loss and build for the future. And then we just added this one, leveraging ARPA funds to update the city's emergency management plan. So let's start the same way. Staff, any additional direction needed on these actions?
The only one that I have a little bit of a question or a thought about is the very first one, assess the city's reserve levels and balance savings, et cetera. I think what we're talking about, what I've heard brought up on various occasions is, maybe a question for you, council, is this review our contingency policy to some extent, or just is this more general? Because this is an ongoing direction that we do in our budget process each year as we bring the budget process through. So I wonder if there's intent that's more specific than just that. Because I have heard some comments about looking at our budget policy, our contingency reserve policy. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Spoon and Councillor Parker. Go ahead first. Oh, Councillor Parker.
Actually, I think we did get into the details on that, which is to ask staff for a review of similar sized Oregon communities to see how our reserves match up to that. Councillor Hensley and I have talked about this over the years, and we were both on the council when we had to lay people off, and we don't want to do that again. But on the other hand, while you don't want to tax and spend, you don't want to tax and hoard. And at some point you get to a place where people are paying taxes and not getting services. So I think in terms of the reserve policy, part of it, Scott, you remember, was me asking for a status of our reserves, but I pulled that off the table when we didn't have a finance director. But I'd still like to see, because all of a sudden, one day I was told we had 30% reserves after 6 years of being told we were in dire financial straits. So I just feel like I didn't do my due diligence in tracking where the reserves were and how this popped up. I come out of a GFOA background, probably outdated now, but of a 5 to 8% reserve. So I just like, in terms of goal, is to have staff review and bring us a recommendation on where we should be.
Okay, so review similar sized cities to compare reserve levels, probably provide some, whatever the current standards are for GFOA and the current status of the city's reserves. That's what I'm hearing. Councillor Spoon?
Yeah, I would agree. I have some concern that we're at the point of tax and hoard, which I think that comparatively to other metro area communities, our property taxes are not as high as other areas, but our reserves are extremely high and we're not providing livability standards. We're not providing services for the taxes. We're just taxing and hoarding the money. And so I would like to see some sort of reserve study comparison with other communities of how much we have in reserves versus other communities. And then given that I anticipate that our reserves are obscenely high compared to other communities that we've been taxing and hoarding. What is the plan for using that money to bring livability standards up to the growth that we've seen? And what's the plan for making our reserves in line with other communities and actually using that money to provide livability for the people that have moved here and are being taxed?
Okay. Mayor Hodson?
Thank you. I think I don't know if it's, well, anyways. So here's the piece I think when we're looking at a study or we're looking at trying to figure out the balance piece of this, I think something we need to look at is a comparison of when was our big economic meltdown? 2007 to 9. I would be curious to know where our reserves were then and where we ended, because the concern was we were not laying off people and we didn't initially, and we were eating through reserves really, really fast. And because we were late in making the decision to downsize some of our staff positions, we did get lower than that 8% dramatically. As a friend of mine refers to it as our seed corn. And so I'm concerned about our current national and global economic situation and what is that going to mean, as costs go up for our city and we're looking at fuel costs for running buses and vehicles and police cars and things like that. What there is that balance piece is 30. Are we at 30? Then that's a lot. If we're below 15, is that too little? Like, where is that sweet spot for us to be in to be able to weather another economic, I don't want to use the catastrophe term, but we'll say an extreme economic hardship without limiting services. But again, if we're looking at standard operating procedures for our city, that sometimes has to happen. So that I would be interested in that time frame and looking at that window to see, and again, what does it cost us on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to run a city, to know that if revenue were cut in half, how quickly would we eat through our reserves? So I think that's an important comparison to have. And when we talk about community needs, I think there should be a council conversation and identification on what needs means, because I think there's a distinct breakdown of, or a distinct difference perhaps amongst the 6 of us, 7 of us on what needs are in our community. Is it just water, power, sewer, streets, trash and fire, or police? Or are there other aspects that are considered needs? And how do we balance that with reserves and spending moving forward?
Okay. Other comments on this one as far as staff direction?
Thank you. Wants versus needs is a good conversation, of course, because that's subjective. I think that I agree. Councilor Parker and I and Mayor Hodson were all on the council when we were in a very dire straits with our budget. And thanks to a lot of work starting with Haley, getting us out of that and providing a structure for a savings plan got us in a better financial shape. This needs to be a longer conversation. I don't think we need to jump the gun on spending any money. I think with the state of the world right now and how scary the economic world looks, I think we should hold on to it, because the last time this kind of the economic world took a dip, it took us better than 2 years to get out of it. So I see this as being a longer conversation than what we can do to tonight. So it definitely needs to be an agenda item for the future. But I'm not ready to jump into spending it right away. I don't think it's taxing and hoarding. I think it's being prudent to holding on to funds that we might need the next couple of years while we wait and see what the world does to us.
Yeah, I think right now just what we're doing is making sure staff has the direction to properly frame this conversation up. So understanding what the council's questions are. And I think you guys have identified some really good points. Anybody else that wants to weigh in on providing staff some direction on this? So far we're going to review similar sized cities to compare reserve levels, understand the status of your current reserves, understand what those GFOA standards are, and just, looking at the balance of spending versus saving and thinking about how you prioritize spending, and then also how you determine what community needs and wants are. And then finally, the point around understanding what the reserve levels were during your last economic crisis or hardship. Did I catch all the points that you guys want to see covered as part of this conversation in the future? Mayor?
Thanks. I would also kind of add to the whole buy and build high versus when we're low. I mean, we go back and we look at like when we started doing planning projects like the Arch and the library and some of those other projects, that's when interest rates were super low. There was not a lot of activity going on. We were able to stretch our dollars a lot further, and so, I think some prudence and perhaps maybe going, okay, if we've saved and it's time to invest back in, what is that going to look like? And then what's the right time to do that? Do we do that when it's at the, interest rates here are back high where they were or where they are? Do we wait until there's that dip again where maybe there's a savings on materials and labor costs or, that aspect of it? So I think that we as a city have been very successful in trying to pull the trigger on some of these projects when the kind of that economy has been not as great, but we've been able to stretch our dollars a lot further to get things accomplished.
Okay. All right. I think we have enough direction now for this one. Lots of interest on this topic. All right. The other actions here are evaluate the city's fee structure. That one feels pretty straightforward unless staff has any questions about that. Okay. Okay. Increase engagement with the budget committee. Yep, Councillor Spoon.
I think it was a little bit more than that. I think that as a council, we talked about addressing specifically the street maintenance fee and the parks maintenance fee.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's a little bit of what that was supposed to address from our goal setting meeting, that there are two specific fees that need to be addressed for permanence and or park maintenance fee and the street maintenance fee.
Street maintenance. Okay.
We've been talking about addressing those for a couple of years now.
And then I guess
And
there is
largely
another, then there's cost recovery on all the fees.
Yes, agreed. I think that
Okay.
all of those exist. But I do think specifically when we talked about that in the initial goal setting session, it was park maintenance and street maintenance and cost recovery, for example, in relation to cemetery and development.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on fees? That sums that up. Okay. Increase engagement with the budget committee. Any additional direction needed on that? We good with that action? Okay. ARPA funds to recover loss and build for the city's future. And then we already talked about the emergency management one. Are we good with this goal area? Anything missing? All right. Great. Is there a short one that we think we can get through before a short break? Let's try parks. No? Yeah, okay. That's fair. How about, let's try engagement. So the overarching goal here is enhance engagement and communications that represents broad perspectives. You guys had some good conversation last time around developing a legislative program and advocacy strategy to help advance some of your goals. Evaluate the implementation of a youth advisory council. Determine the future of the urban renewal agency. And then again, we already talked about this one, the emergency management plan. So staff, any additional direction needed on these actions?
No direction. I think we could note the discussions are underway on the Urban Renewal Agency. In fact, a week from tonight, we're going to have a follow-up work session with you on those topics that we've talked about before with the funds and all that. And then again, the ARPA money, that discussion has begun and we're going to be working forward. So I think if you were noting things that were kind of already underway, I would just add that piece. Do you have any clarification on anything?
I guess the area around developing a legislative program and advocacy strategy is a macro look at outside of Canby, right? And whether that is state level or federal level, and I assume both levels, just for the plurality of everybody, that we're going to look at both of those. I sort of see.
I think I remember the conversation being more local level, state and maybe county, what really actually affects Canby and what we could actually affect change in. I don't think we have a lot of a voice outside of Councillor Parker in the federal level. So I think that I think that we were more discussing state legislation.
Okay.
I agree with Councillor Hensley. I would say that I think that the conversation we had a few weeks ago when we talked about it is how do we determine even what we're advocating for? If there's dissent on council, like how do we determine what rises to the level of getting advocacy? Because I don't think that there's consensus largely amongst council on a lot of issues. And so what are the guidelines around that and what do we advocate for?
Yeah, we can discuss what those guardrails would be. I think the tolling issue would be a good example of something being that, given that Clackamas County is being kind of the guinea pig here, you've got a lot of cities in the county that are bumping up against this and really advocating, and the county and a lot of letters are going to the OTC that are probably going through the shredder, but that's my assumption. But at least we're trying to fight for our communities. And so I think it's stuff like that I think that affects the communities as a whole. I mean, the chamber does their job advocating for the business district. So I don't know that that's really our role at this desk. But things like infrastructure bills and things like that, I think that's what we would be talking to the legislature about.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Farwood.
Yeah, I know that one of the things I was talking to somebody from the chamber and they were talking about their legislative committee. And I know that, Councillor Schwinn's right. We do largely disagree sometimes on this dais of what we would want to advocate for. And I know the position that the chamber takes is if they don't agree on it, they just don't take a position on it. So that might be, something that we could do here is, if we disagree on our position on it, it's probably not something that, we should, advocate for, because we'll create more division. I think that's just kind of my thought on that, is if we disagree on something, I don't think we should necessarily advocate for it.
Councillor Spoon, and then.
Yeah, I think that like what those guardrails are, we can determine at a later time. My concern is I'm not sure there's anything we'll get complete consensus on. And so we have to make a determination about at some point, do we advocate or do we not advocate? If we determine that a complete lack of unanimous vote means we don't advocate, that's fine. But those guidelines I think are to be determined later. And that's the point of this conversation.
My other comment, or kind of a question and a comment, I guess, was I know when we did the first goal setting session, council was talking about a lot potentially contracting with a lobbyist. I think there was discussion at either the federal and or the state level, and so I don't know if that's worth.
I recall
noting
the conversation. I was going to bring that back up. You guys did talk. There was more of a focus on the state level, and then it also came up that you guys are members of the League of Oregon Cities, right, and that one of the services you receive is our lobbying services. Right. And just a note to that is they do provide at least the foundation of a legislative program for cities to consider. And so, and then some cities start with that as a place of, consensus on things that are going to come forth in the state legislature that year that will impact local government. And then some cities will add to that or kind of add their specific interest on it as a starting point for a legislative program. So then it gives you direction on advocacy when those issues come up. The other thing that I recall you guys talking about were some transportation projects that might be impacted by federal funding. And so that's where you were talking about a federal lobbyist. So.
Yeah, that's what I was, thank you for, that was what I was getting at. And I think there's, my background with this type of work is that when we get into, whether it's at the federal or state level, when we get into legislative sessions, bills get proposed and like hundreds of bills get proposed, and trying to figure out which ones we're interested in or not. And we don't really have the capacity or anybody assigned at the staff level right now to manage through that. And so whether, we might want to think about, and this might be getting further into the weeds, but I don't know if it's worth somehow, putting as a potential, at least reviewing this idea where council, if you're interested in that, would consider perhaps spending a little bit of money on an annual basis on somebody to help us sift through that, bring you a report at the beginning of a legislative session or prior to it, and saying, are these anything that you want us to help track and then take position on or something like that? That's something I know I've done in other agencies. So just something to think about. That might just be more planting a seed for a future conversation on this topic.
Councillor Hensley.
Thank you. Yeah, we could potentially hire someone who can do that kind of thing, but I do know that the League of Oregon Cities does do, they have a staff that goes through all the bills, the 3,000 plus that come through the session, and sift out the ones that affect municipalities. They kind of send out emails and stuff, and it's just whether or not we pick and choose to do anything about it. I mean, they do kind of have call to action, and their suggestion may not be what we all decide we agree on. So we might agree to take a different position than the LLC, but at least they're already doing the work for us to know what bills are going to affect the municipalities. So I think that's a good place to start. And we're already a member, so we wouldn't have to spend extra money. But I think just knowing about it and knowing they're lobbying for us as a general for all municipalities might not be enough. Having one of us or a plurality of us, or just sending a letter sometimes helps. So I think we should be being more active in advocating for these bills or against these bills, as it were. I feel like LLC is offering us information that we're really not doing anything with. So that was kind of my point in the last session.
Councillor Spoon.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the important note is that it's part of our policy as a council that should anyone speak on behalf of the city, that they have the blessing of the council to do so. And so should we agree to send someone, that we are all aligned on what that person is going to advocate for and what they're going to say. Not a single one of us is authorized to speak on behalf of the city without kind of consent or blessing of the plurality of council. So that's an important part of that conversation too, that we don't just send someone without a pre-aligned message.
Well, so just to kind of bring this one home, I think there are many cities out there that have pretty robust legislative programs, and perhaps the staff's direction here is to bring back a few examples of what it entails and the resources required as part of your budget discussions. Here's what you get based on how much money you spend. Is that fair, staff? Yeah. Okay. Is everybody good with that? That approach? Okay, great. Any others on this one that you want to touch on? Are you good with how those are presented? Good? Okay, great. Well, we're right at like 7:45, so why don't we just take a quick break, and then we have just a few more to get through. Just 2 more, and go from there. So 10 minutes, is that good? All right, 7:55. See you back.
Recording in progress.
There we go. Okay. So we are going to pick back up our goal refinement process on the goal area around parks and recreation. So during our previous workshop, we talked about the overarching outcome of wanting to develop a more robust and parks and recreation program aligned with the needs identified in the city's parks master plan. So a couple of the ideas that came up under this goal area were or strategies to advance this goal were to explore partnership options with the school district for property sale, exchange, or long-term lease, to pursue the legal determination on the wayside use, to evaluate sustainability, and that's one I think needs a little more direction, as well as developing a communication and engagement plan. And that one also needs some more direction. So, staff, what additional direction do you guys need or questions that you have?
Okay. I guess, were we going to put an asterisk maybe by explore the partnership options? Because I know Mr. Archer's already in talks with Aaron Downs at the school district. Correct. And then also the legal determination, I've tried to send out a couple of different informative emails, which are getting pretty much all of the sides of that shape. So if you could put an asterisk by that, that would be helpful. And then we'll decide how to share that as a council.
Okay.
And then I think you already said it, Sarah, but evaluate sustainability. I think a little more direction on that. And then the communication engagement plan, is that under the right heading, or was that
maybe it's not. I captured it. Maybe the post-it was misaligned or something, and somehow it ended up in this one.
It was supposed to maybe be under the other one.
The other one.
Yeah, I don't think that's a component.
I didn't think so.
I was going to say that wording, maybe what's the purpose of the master plan, but we caught that in the heading of the goal there.
Okay, let's, was this one that went up here around engagement and communications?
I kind of recall that. We had a bit of a talk about maybe bringing on a staff person or having some large, broad, overarching communications plan that we don't have now. You know what I mean? I think we had some vague talk about that. So,
okay,
unless I'm wrong, does anyone else kind of recall that? Okay.
I think that was David's point about just having some sort of focus on communications and what we do. I mean, for example, how we bobbled the whole quiet zone, and instead of marketing that as the safety zone, communication person would think about that. But to the points that you read, I think all of those are on track. Is that what you were saying, Joe? Is that each one of those, to my understanding, is in progress?
Except for, we need some more direction around this evaluate sustainability one. And then we can go back up to the communications and engagement one, because that was part of that other goal and just was an error on my part. Councillor Spoon?
I recall evaluate sustainability being related to funding. So the park maintenance fee and or budgeting maintenance and how we bring on new parks and what that looks like in terms of maintenance and making sure that our parks plan is sustainable. So from my perspective, that's what I recall, is that evaluate sustainability was related to budgeting, maintenance. So we have a certain fund for developing new parks, but that is a different fund than park maintenance. And so unless I'm wrong, does anyone see that the same way? Yeah.
Yes, Mayor Hodson.
No, I recall that being the long-term, how do we, again, some of that's going to come in the master plan, but yeah, in terms of just expanding on that and fleshing that out, it was about, how do we fund and how do we do that long-term, right?
How do we fund new parks as well as maintain them further?
Yeah. How do we take care of what we have? How do we add new and take care of it? And then, and I think, and that was, park maintenance fee. There was discussion of, Capper kind of fell in that bucket as well as a conversation topic. That's that Canby Area Park and Rec District for those at home. I think fell under that sustainability piece.
The Parks District.
Well, and I would assume sustainability could also be adding the recreation back to the Parks and Rec too, because that could be a big program or a smaller program and grow or whatever.
Did we put staffing in this section as well? Did you type that in there, Sarah?
I don't have anything specifically related to staff,
Part of that.
but evaluating the staff resources necessary to.
Yeah, that's part of that sustainability. Right, because that, going back to our earlier conversation, when we ran an economic challenge in 7 through 9, the hit was taken to the parks team. And that's what put us kind of behind on the whole maintenance aspect. So, so how do we prevent that for the future too?
Okay.
Sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in terms of council goals, we've already established that we're not going to build any parks that we can't maintain. To me, the sustainability is asking staff to bring us back and for us to have on the agenda, Mayor, a discussion and vote on extending the park maintenance fee. Part of the staff work is the analysis of what our parks look like without the fee and what we can do with it. But in terms of sustainability for me, that is the policy point that we haven't faced yet. I think in terms of a goal, all of us are on board in terms of we're not going to build a park if we can't maintain it. So really there's a policy question to be held out there, and that's extending the park maintenance fee. It was set up as a 5-year fee. We're getting on the downward slope on that, and I'd rather have us do an up or down yes or no vote on that sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. So we understand the context is all about, related to the funding for maintenance budgeting. How do we take care of what we have, as well as adding new and maintaining them, looking at the fee extension of the fee as a policy decision around that. Looking at evaluating adding recreation services back to that program, and also evaluating the staff resources necessary to fund your desired program.
Can I ask one clarification too?
Yes.
So there was also some discussion, you're like, no, you're done. No, that there was some discussion about whether or not we would encourage our planning department to only have SDCs versus land acquisition as well. And so I don't know if it falls under this bullet point, but that would be helpful for staff to know if we should, unless it's the Emerald Necklace, you were only asking for SDCs or something, some sort of policy direction on that too. So
That'd be a good action item.
Councillor Spoon?
Yeah, everyone knows I feel very strongly about that. I would like to develop some sort of policy or framework around if a developer would like to donate land in lieu of all or a portion of SDCs, what that process looks like. We don't really have one right now. And additionally, I wanted to go back to explore partnerships with the school district for property sale, exchange, or long-term lease. I would like to see an executive session on that. I think that we need to have some conversation privately related to real estate that would allow us to talk about what is the same and what has changed. So I think that largely we're probably on the same page, but I think an executive session would go a long way if you're already having conversations with Dr. Downs, which I love. I love that you're doing that, but perhaps an executive session to get some framework around that, I think is prudent, like sooner rather than later.
And just to clarify, I'm not negotiating anything. I've just initiated the conversation and just anecdotally at this point, but just so everybody knows, because I know everybody's interested, there's a lot more receptivity to that discussion. And but that's all I've done so far, just entertain the idea of let's get together and start working on this. And
I trust you and I did not mean to imply. I did not mean to imply. I love that you've opened, I love that you opened the conversation. I just think we have not had that conversation as a council in a very long time. It's been a long time since we did it. So it's probably, we may as well do it now and make it all congruent. Yeah.
Okay, so what we have then in the realm of parks, are to, this is already underway, but understanding there's more conversations around real estate that need to happen, but exploring those partnership options with the school district, already underway, but pursuing the legal determination on the wayside use. And then we just had received some good direction around what evaluate sustainability means. So we'll reword that for you to better reflect your direction on that. Councilor Parker?
And the policy discussion and direction on the SDCs.
Yes.
I think it would be helpful for staff if we could all, a majority of us agree, that except in extreme cases, we don't want their least developable land. That we'll take the cash. Thank you. There may be some situations where we do want the land, but otherwise, in terms of the planning commission and in terms of planning staff, not to waste their times on discussion of that sort of thing, that they can just explain to developers that this is the direction of the council. Now, I don't know how we get there, whether you have to come to us, whether you have to do that by resolution or intent of the council. But I'd like to save our development staff and planning commission from even having to have that filter.
So I'm hearing there'll be two additional actions under this area. One will be the policy direction on SDCs and that framework for donating land in lieu of SDCs. And then the other item is the discussion on extending the park maintenance fee, on the analysis of the park maintenance fee, because that really gets to the sustainability piece. Mary, I know this came up last time and you brought it up in your comments around the Canby Area Parks and Rec District. Was there a separate specific action on that? I know there are some kind of
I don't know if there's,
or I guess there was uncertainty around what as a council you guys could even influence. So I don't know if there's a proposal for an action or.
I guess my proposal for an action on that is, and I think it kind of came up in our conversation, is one, a history lesson on a more recent history lesson. We don't need to go back to 1970 on this issue, but what's that?
It's 40 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't need a full history, but just a recent one. And that to discuss, how, is that a district that we want to work with and leverage? Is that how does that play into our parks and rec components? There's been dialogue up here about, no, we don't want another layer of government. No, yes, we want somebody that can be a funding mechanism. How does that work? I know that in the parks master plan piece that was an ask for them to look at in terms of is how can the park and rec district be used as a funding mechanism for parks and recreation growth and the maintenance of said parks. So I don't know how we create it. Scott's the parks guy. So that's the best I can do in terms of my explanation on it. If someone wants to streamline that thought, I'm all for it.
I will just agree that the conversation about CAPR is complicated. It's not just like, do we support them? Do we not endorse them? But really, if they exist, what does our relationship with them look like? It's a fairly nuanced and complicated question. And so I would largely agree with the mayor that conversation is more than just CAPR, yay or nay. It's an if yes, then what? If no, then what? It requires really its own meeting, I think, to have that conversation. Even before we meet with CAPR, as a board, we haven't really had the conversation about what's our perspective on it. We've talked about meeting with CAPR or this or that, but I think as a board, we need to establish what our position is before we even have a meeting with anyone else. So I would just back that. I think he's spot on there.
Yes, Councilor Parker?
Now, let me club this horse myself a little bit here. I think I'd like to leave open the option of some sort of usefulness of Capper to the area's park and especially recreation area. But I think it's premature right now. We are on the eve of getting our hands on and setting specific direction out of the park's master plan. And I think we've got a fistful of decisions that we need to make on that. And again, the idea about if this city moves into a recreation program, is that something that we want to do only by ourselves, or do we want to have a partner with that? So I don't want to foreclose any possibilities that I could see how that could be a tool. But I don't think it's anything. I think we need to get through our park master planning process before we move on to that. But again, we've got a Parks guy as our city manager, so I'll defer to him.
I would agree, and that's what I was just about to say before you spoke as well. So I think if we get when we get the results of the master plan, that'll help frame up some of that conversation, and then we can have some conversation around where the Capper piece of it kind of lies within that whole planning of our scope of what we're doing with Parks and Rec. So yeah.
So is there a desire to have this reflected in the goals, or just know that this is coming as an outcome from your Parks and Rec master plan process?
Yeah, that's kind of, I think it's both and, but I think it's more of an outcome of, because my understanding from the Parks Master Plan portion of Capper is that there was meetings with members of Capper, and the discussion with that was to, like, how can Capper be utilized in a partnership with not only the city, but our Parks and Rec board, right? So when we look at, and Scott and I have had some conversation with this, and is that is that through IGAs, MOUs, intergovernmental agreements, memorandums of understanding between Capper and the city? And what is that district? There's been talk of shrinking the district. There's been talk of, does the Capper become the funding piece?
Let me pause for a second.
Yeah.
It's 8:15. I want to make sure, I promise we get done by 9:00. I think by putting something in your goals, it sounds like this is going to happen anyway. By putting something in your goals, it elevates it to a certain, or it communicates that the council is actively working on this. And so I think, it's kind of a decision of does this need to be elevated in the goals to highlight to the community that this is something that we're working on at this time, or can you trust that staff's going to bring it forward no matter what?
I think it's more of a tactic or an action item, not a goal.
Yeah. Are you done? Okay. I agree with the mayor that I think that it's more of we're going to get the Parks Master Plan, and it's part of that larger conversation. It's like a sub conversation of that. So I don't think we have to establish it as a goal. I think we're all aware that conversation is coming.
Okay. I'm going to highlight it as a footnote then, unless anybody else dissents on that. Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
It's out there. Staff's going to make sure it comes forward to you. Okay. Okay, great. So the one that got mixed up here in the wrong category that I want to just circle back to, hopefully efficiently, was developing a communication and engagement plan. This one should have been up here in the enhanced engagement and communications goal area. And Councilor Bajorn, I think this was one that you brought forward to everyone's attention. Is there anything that you want to refresh our memories on so we begin the discussion?
the phrase I used at the time was brand management. In other words, the example of the quiet zone, right? The community has been asking dozens of questions about it again and again and again. Maintenance of 99E, that is ODOT's responsibility, not the city's. I think it's about time we start kind of looking at that and saying, okay, how can we manage that in a way that is productive, that's going to put the right message out and say, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how. So, it hopefully minimizes more of those questions on social media instead of, keeping it to, hey, look at the city's website, right? We've got all this information right here in front of us, right? Look at that, reference that first. And if you have any questions, email one of us, email, someone on, staff, right? And say, hey, I need clarification on this, right?
Okay. Councillor Spoon?
I completely agree with Councillor Bajorn. From my perspective, the way that that's executed is administratively, and us throwing the support behind Scott to make a budget request for a PIO, a public information officer, someone on staff who is equipped, trained, and ready to kind of be the master of communication. So I think you're 100% right. I think our city has grown enough that now it's time for that. I think the venue to get there is probably administrative. And so I'm not sure that a goal is the right plan, but I think we could probably get consensus to back Scott in making a decision budgetarily to hire a PIO. And if I think that we're on the same page about where that's headed. I'm not sure there's really a policy decision there, but I think that policy wise, we can agree that's a desire of council, but that executing that is really an administrative task.
Other thoughts on this from the council? Yeah. Oh, Councillor Parker. Sorry. It's getting late. I'm assuming now that I'm looking at you. You raised your hand. Yes, go ahead.
You probably made the right choice. Well, another way to skin this cat is to establish as a goal that the city have a communications plan, communications and citizen involvement plan. The mayor and I have been talking about this how many years, that the structure that we have for citizen involvement is the same one that's existed for 50 years. And finally, with hybrid meetings, we're able to get around the fact that citizens who have childcare issues or ambulatory or transportation issues can still participate instead of having to be on site for these meetings. So I see them as two sides of the same coin, is communication and strategic communication. What are the top 5 things that people don't understand? And then for the next year, let's have an education program that for every one of us who shows up at a Kiwanis meeting or Rotary or whatever, that we've got these talking points. And also taking a look at our citizen involvement program, that we have a paucity of people from Spanish speaking background in our boards and commissions and our council, putting some resources into that. But unless you need me to send you a fax, I bet you probably already have it and understand where we're coming from on this.
Any additional comments on this? Mayor Hodson.
Thank you. Great idea. Great pieces to that. There still is a component, as we know, that no matter how much information you put out there, people have to want to digest that information. And oftentimes, social media becomes that vehicle of well, I'm just going to tag all the city councilors and hopefully someone will answer my question within Canby Now, and oftentimes that ends up happening is they get an answer in that capacity. If I recall back, we'll jump in the Wayback Machine and go to 2006 and 2007. We had a assistant city recorder that did a newsletter, did bulk emails out to people and things like that. And unfortunately, that position was one that got eliminated. And now here we're back. We've got Maya back in the role. We have an assisted city recorder. I don't know if that's something that within her work scope, again, if that's something we want to pursue and whatnot, then that's obviously falls in Scott's purview to work that out with the team and whatnot. I think there's great things to be able to put those communication pieces out there and point to it and say, actually, if you check out the website and go to those past articles, they're readable. I mean, or it's one of those like, great, these are the topics that we're going to put in a newsletter January, February, March, April, and May of every year, and until it's kind of ad nauseum, right? Obviously, a newsletter that outlines the urban renewal district would be about a 14-page document that no one would read anyways, but very few. But, but when we get into some of those items that are constantly coming up all the time at, community meetings, how do we capture that? So I don't know if it's leveraging a current person. I don't know if that's providing the tools to somebody already on staff on how to be a PIO. Is that a service? Is that, we're just in our conversation, I was jotting down, we're kind of adding a lot of head count. So that's something to be cognizant of as well. So
I just, again, I want to try to keep this moving along. I see your hand. Let me see if this brings clarity, but am I hearing enough agreement from the council that you at least want to, not talking about how we're getting there, because again, I think staff will bring forward some options for how you get there, but the goal that you have a communication and engagement plan in place?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Spoon, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to address we're adding headcount. I mean, the city has grown exponentially since we've added headcount, and there comes a point when headcount needs to be added. And I think we need to acknowledge that, yes, there is an expense to adding headcount, but that is a necessary part of growth, and growth adds to the tax base to allow for that. So I think that is probably a policy issue is how much, and that goes back to the reserve study and how much we want to have in reserves. That's all part of the larger conversation. But I acknowledge it requires head growth. I think that though our community has grown and necessitates some growth in staffing. I would add though that I think the conversation maybe for staff is it sounds like there's a difference in our opinion about whether communication should be kind of passive in nature and let's just have a newsletter every couple months, or proactive and engaged and drawing it out and what that looks like. And that's probably administrative, but it sounds to me like that's the difference in perspective is passive communications versus proactive, engaged, reach out communications.
So again, I think you guys could probably debate this for a long time, but I'm going to defer back to the fact that there are many good examples out there of communications and engagement. I will say this is timely because the way that cities are doing this work has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. Community expectations, as people have become much more comfortable communicating electronically and on Zoom and doing hybrid meetings and things like that. People's desires have changed. So I think your team can probably bring you back some great examples of programs and ways that you can do communication, which I always couch as that is information out and the kind of those more passive ways of providing information versus engagement, which is kind of what Councillor Parker was talking about of how do we truly involve the citizens and engage them in various decision-making processes and really understanding community attitudes. So I think that you guys have some pretty solid direction on how to take this forward and bring it back to the council. And you guys can have some lively policy discussions on how you achieve that through the budget process and allocating resources. So is everybody good with leaving it at that tonight?
We'll have those policy discussions when you're long gone, so you don't have to listen to them anymore.
You guys, I can hardly wait to read about how it all comes together. It's going to be beautiful headlines, I'm sure. Okay, of how you achieve all your goals through your budget process. It's going to be great. All right, last area is planning and transportation system that eases the impacts of community growth. So there were lots of conversations around specific transportation projects when we had all those Post-its up on the board, but then we slimmed that down because all of those things were going to be addressed through an update of your transportation system plan. And so that's a big objective under here. That's the first one. There was some discussion on the future of the Canby Ferry. That one was one where I didn't have a ton of notes about that, so probably need some additional direction on that one. We had a lot of discussion around this too, of building relationships with ODOT and Clackamas County to plan and fund future transportation improvements, and then doing some advocacy for Berg Parkway. So those were the 4 items I had left under the transportation category. So we'll start with staff. Any additional direction needed on these objectives?
I think council knows we're working on nearing that transportation system plan update. That's already kind of on our list. So again, that could be one of those.
Asterisks.
Yeah, in process, or at least, very much on our radar to begin. The Canby Ferry, I think that conversation emanated from a couple things. One is I received a request from the county that we're looking at. It's on our list of items to bring to the council, some discussion about potentially participating in some funding and just kind of helping the county support that and keep the Canby, whether we want to help keep the Canby Ferry operational. I think the other prong of that discussion was just that there's a general interest in it. It's, something that's kind of an icon of our community and what the council's level of interest is there. So there's a specific request from the county that's already kind of in motion, and we were going to bring that to the council. And the other is that I think was a bigger discussion that I recall having some discussion around that.
Okay.
Just for clarification, is the Burke Parkway, is that basically the Arndt Road extension? Is that what the idea is? Okay.
The what?
The Arndt Road extension, because it says Burke Parkway, but I just wanted to double check and make sure that that's the idea.
Okay.
Because there are 3 different options and one of them does indeed go into the Parkway, but.
Yeah.
So it's more of a Burke Parkway / Arndt Road.
Can you say the name of the road one more time?
ARNDT.
ARNDT. Between trains and.
Yeah.
That could mean a lot of things. Okay. Councillor Varwig, and then Councillor Hensley.
Yeah, I think as far as the Canby Ferry feature, and obviously advocacy for Berg Parkway, we need it. A lot of those are outside of our hands. So while being on our goal setting, the Canby Ferry is outside of our city boundary and owned by the county, and loses $400,000 a year. That doesn't seem like it would be good use of funding. But I think a lot of that is outside of our control. And I guess if we're just saying advocacy, that can stay on, that's good on there, but I don't know how much we can do on those 2 things right now.
Councillor Hensley.
Thank you. I'm just on the Burke Parkway Arndt Road connection piece. I'm just wondering what conduct advocacy, what that piece is, because my way of thinking the Burke Parkway Arndt Road connection was kind of should be an asterisk, because those conversations are happening from what I understand as recently as this morning. I heard that you had just had a meeting, so would that be an asterisk item that you're already working on it? So I'm wondering what the advocacy piece is. I don't recall that part of the conversation last time. So what's the advocacy? What are we looking at in that word? They're looking at options.
Making sure the state knows that we want.
So advocacy with region leaders rather than the community at large.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that was my idea.
But that's an asterisk item though, in my view, because you're already kind of having those conversations, correct?
Yes, and it's specifically, that one mostly is with the county, I think. So that's probably the agency we'd be advocating to or with. But yes, there are conversations with within the transportation realm of things happening, and yeah.
Okay. Councillor Spoon and then Councillor.
I think that was my item, and it was advocacy because it's a multi-agency project. And I think one of my concerns was, I'm told the advocacy is happening not necessarily at the staff level, though it's great that you had a meeting, but I was told in the goal setting session that advocacy is happening. I don't think council's had a conversation about what we're advocating for, what we're looking for. So I was a little bit concerned at the idea that advocacy was happening outside of a plurality of council agreeing on what that advocacy is and what we're looking for. So I think that maybe a work session on what that project is, what we're looking for, and what a plurality of council agrees to advocating for, because I guess I was a little bit surprised in our goal setting session to be told, no, we're advocating for that all the time at C4 or with the county or with the state, when I don't think council's met about what that advocacy looks like. And our policy actually requires a plurality of council to agree on what advocacy looks like. So I think that a meeting of the minds would be appropriate at this point in time for that.
Okay. It's good direction. Councillor Parker?
Well, I was going to try and offer some shorthand. How about as a policy goal that we want to explore strategies that will improve our access to I-5?
Reframing this language to explore strategies that will improve access to I-5.
I'll take any one of them. Just give me something.
Okay. Council, are you guys good with, the rest of you, you good with reframing that language to, and then the Councillor Spoon's point, you know, having some more discussion around what that looks like and being clear about what you're advocating for? Yes? Okay. Great. Any additional comments on these other ones? I think you guys are all in favor of updating the transportation system plan. That is one that addresses a lot of the ideas that came up in that idea mapping conversation. Any dissent there? Okay. And then just the building of the relationships with ODOT and Clackamas County to help you plan and fund some of those transportation improvements that might come up as part of that transportation system planning process. All in support of that? Okay. Well, we have covered and refined all of these. So to kind of begin the process of wrapping up, how, just on a scale of 1 to 10, we'll go across the dais here. How are you feeling? 1 being, we really missed the mark. 10 being, I feel really confident about these goals, these shared goals going forward, and excited to work on them. So 1 to 10, how are you feeling? We'll start with Councillor Bajoran.
I'm at an 8.
8? Okay. Councillor Varwig?
Probably 7.5.
7.5. All right. Mayor Hodson? Okay. Good. Councillor Hensley?
7.
7. All right. Councillor Parker?
8.
Okay. Councillor Spoon?
8.
8. Good. I feel like those are good marks. That's a pretty solid vote of confidence. I had a group the other night where we had some 2s and they still had some work to do. So 7s and above are, I feel you guys are in the right direction and had some really good conversation about the goals. Staff, any other questions on the goals? Okay, let's talk just quickly about the goal implementation piece. So this is an opportunity for the council to provide some feedback on how you'd like to see the goals, like progress reported, and how often, what the frequency is of when you check in on the goals or how you check in on the goals. So just a couple of examples in other agencies. Sometimes in staff reports, there'll be a section that's highlighted of it being like a council goal area. So you know that it's related to the goals that you set when something comes forward, and it's really clear on how it connects with this conversation that you've had and how it's coming forward in a staff report. So that's one option to keep it front and center. Some groups decide they want quarterly check-ins. I'll just tell you that sometimes that can be really tedious for staff to turn those reports around all the time. So just be mindful of the frequency for which you're asking for updates. Sometimes just every 6 months, checking in on the goals feels appropriate. And then definitely, I would always recommend an annual check-in on the goals to see what's changed, what needs to be updated. And typically with election cycles, when you have new people coming on board, it's prudent to do a goal setting session again, where when you have new faces at the table, it's always a good time to check in and see what sort of new ideas are coming up. So those are some practices I've seen in other communities, and let's just go around and hear what you have. So I saw Councillor Parker's hand and then Councillor Barwick.
My suggestion would be to ask our administrative team for their recommendations. The last thing they need is for us to engineer some goofy plan that they then have to carry out. I'd rather us approve their goofy plan on how to do this. I remember at Gresham when I was there on this exact question. On every report that we submitted to the council, we had to say which goal this applies to. So I'd rather have our administrative team say, here is something that we can do that's workable within. I don't want to have a reporting scheme that increases the number of hours on every project we do.
Councillor Barwick?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think on an as-needed basis, if there's something coming up that we're discussing that might touch on one of these, maybe a quick update on how this is affecting our goals. But also, I think, as you mentioned, an annual, I was going to say end of the year, but again, with it being an election year, that could possibly change from December to January, who's sitting in these seats. And so maybe after the first of the year, as we start to gear up for next year's goal setting, to kind of touch base on how we're doing on all of these.
Any other expectations to
I was
share
going to
with
say one more
staff?
thing. I was going to say one more thing, sorry, and that's once we accomplish a goal, maybe to have a celebration or, something, not necessarily a party, but I mean, just to celebrate it on the dais here to say we've accomplished this goal and acknowledge that we did what we set out to do.
Okay. Councillor Spoon?
I would love to hear how staff would like to report on it, but I think it would be great if there was like an Excel spreadsheet that just you kept a general status update. And if at any point in time one of us said, what's going on, you could easily send it to us, but it doesn't have to be detailed. Just like this is the last action that was taken on this goal, whatever, like something simple that should anyone call for, status, that we could get a quick, this is the goal Excel spreadsheet, largely in terms of how you communicate on each individual goal. I assume that will be as needed as progress occurs or whatever, and I'm interested in your input. But it would be nice to have a general spreadsheet that if we said, you could just send us like, this is last action taken, this is where we're at.
Okay. Mayor Hodson?
So I think to Councillor Parker's point, I think when 2 city managers ago, when things were being moved forward for conversation, it was often either in the staff report, how it was supporting a particular goal item that we had identified. So I think doing something like that in a staff report would be, hey, this falls under goal such and is meeting or moving towards that. And I think to build on maybe Councillor Spoon's comment is even like a Gantt chart almost of like, the projects listed out to where, great, we're 10% of the way there, we're, 80% of the way there, that kind of thing. And I like the idea of, we'll do high fives when we complete something on the list, and we'll bring a fruit basket for staff. How's that?
Okay. I have got all the ideas down for recognition. High fives, thermometers, fruit baskets. All right. I've squeezed and extracted every last good idea.
Yes. Scott and Joe and Melissa are staff team here.
How do you see reporting back to the council as
I have to report it.
a methodology, or like quarterly, monthly, twice a month, every 6 months?
The first,
Well, I
I can give a kind of my quick answer, and then I'm sure we'll have more conversation as we unfold all this. But the two things that I well, actually not just two, but a couple things that really hit me are I've done this in other places, and I really like putting the goal on the staff report and saying this goes with goals number 1 and 3. It accomplishes something to those things or whatever. I also like the kind of this Gantt chart, spreadsheet, whatever we call it, that can easily be just sent out to you, as kind of as needed, or we could send it out monthly or something like that.
Reports that we get maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be in those. That's not only is that, I think, easy to do, it is very helpful for staff as well, because it helps us track what we're doing for your goals, and then we send that to you, and so that those two are slam dunks. I think just the kind of maybe massaging how often we want to do some kind of a formal report in a council meeting or something like that. We could work that out. And then I would just like to, as kind of on this topic, advocate that we do a refresher on these every year. Now that we've set the kind of a baseline here, and I know it had been a while since we've done this previously, but if we were able to stay on this every year, I think the lift will be easier each year, because we'll just revisit. Do we want to adjust to where we at on these? So I would certainly love to see us do that, obviously.
It wouldn't have to take 2 nights and 10 hours. Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Well, and to build on that, Scott, the other thing that it would help staff with, when anybody came up with yet another great idea, naming no names, but me, of being able to say, well, how does that fit into our existing set of goals? And it's a way to put it on the bubble until our next goal setting session. It's a way for staff to weaponize against an overcrowded agenda and ad hoc topics coming at you. So I think it's a way for us to discipline ourselves, and it's a way for staff to have some sense of, this is going to be my workload for the next year, and I'm going to be protected from something falling out of the sky.
My only add, and this is to build on Councillor Hensley's point, which is I could envision a lot of these being in the bi-monthly reports, because planning could just say, this is where we're at on the housing needs and assessment. This is where we're on the economic, this is the contact that we've made as one of their bullet point items too. So there could probably be a multitude of modes of how to communicate these things, and not just maybe just one, but yeah, the frequency of maybe a giant report is still something we could come up with too.
I think you guys are on the right track. I think the key to goal implementation is really keeping the goals in front of you. And to Councilor Parker's point, the council, it does give staff a great tool to remind elected bodies what they set their sights on. So because you are going to see all of those other issues and, hot topics come up in your community. And this is a way to keep you focused with eye on the prize. Not to say that those things, sometimes you won't have to deal with them, but it's good to have a mindful, intentional conversation about what maybe the timeline can slip a little bit because you've got to deal with this other thing. So it forces you to be thoughtful about how you prioritize. Yes.
I think I'm just adding on to what you just said, but even to the point of posting those goals in the council chambers, in our administrative offices, actually kind of put them in a frame. I think we've got one that is back here. I believe that's the last time there was a formal goal setting. So literally keeping it in front of us. And had another thought, but it went away. So if it comes back, I'll go back.
Yeah, one deliverable that you'll get as part of your summary report is I'll put together a little graphic of your goals and the kind of the high level titles. Now, it won't have all the detail behind it. That will be in your report. But some councils have taken that graphic and they just they print it, laminated in like 11 by 17. They have it at each seat of the die. So it's constantly in front of you. So you cannot forget.
We had like 20 by 24 poster on the wall behind the dais in
Yeah.
the old building. So we just haven't done that since having it, displayed
That's
like
back
that.
there.
It's just been in our packet. Where?
So that back frame there.
It's too far
That's
away.
it.
I can't see it over here.
Anyhow, that'll be part of your deliverables that we'll put together.
And you just reminded me what the thing I couldn't remember was, which is maybe I'm jumping ahead to what you were going to talk
No,
about,
go
but I
ahead.
think the implementation, and I guess I wanted to make sure with council where we're at here is how we're going to receive the final information from you and when we might expect that. And then the idea that we would bring that to council to adopt or officially, recognize that these are the goals as soon as we're able to. So do you have,
Yeah.
can
I
you just
probably
talk about
need
how
to-
that would
Let's talk
proceed?
about it generally, because I'm not going to consult my calendar in the middle of the meeting. But I think within 2 weeks, I'll have a solid draft report put together for you. So you would be able to get that to the council for, I'm not sure what your packet deadlines are. I'll probably check with Melissa on that to try and align closely so that you can have it here pretty soon. If not your next meeting, I'm not sure when that is,
Next week.
following next week. Yeah. So it probably won't be ready for
April
next week's meeting, but probably then the one after that. That sound good? All right. So just the final thought as we wrap up this process is just to close everything out is to just maybe reflect for a moment as to what you want to, we started with setting the intention, and now I just want you to think of your intention as a team to move the goals forward and maybe something that you're going to take as you take forward with you into this work and implementing your goals. So just how you want to be intentional about being a part of this team, because as we talked about in the very beginning, you guys need to act as one body to help move these goals forward. And so I want to end it on a positive note of how are you guys going to work together as a team, and each individual, like how are you going to be a part of this team to move your goals forward? It's important. I mean, you've dedicated all this time and energy into forming goals. And so you guys game for it's just a quick statement. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be lengthy. I would actually encourage you to keep it 30 seconds or less of just, a thought or a sentiment on that. Councillor Bajoran?
I think for me, it'll just be constantly keeping my eye on the prize. Whenever things get a little dicey out of hand, saying, hey, let's focus on what we're trying to achieve here as a group.
All right, Councillor Barway?
I think remembering who we serve and that we're here to serve the citizens of Canby and not ourselves.
Mayor Hodson?
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Just how you're, how you're going to reflect on how you're going to be a team player to help move these goals forward.
For me, it'll be to, much like the two previous gentlemen, just keep us moving forward. And listen and react differently.
Councillor Hensley?
Continue to have conversations. God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. I use them accordingly.
And what was that?
I said, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I use them accordingly.
Okay. All right, Councillor Parker?
Well, usually I require a little more processing time, but let me give you this. It's to do, as we were talking about with our administrative team, and that's to try and focus my strategies into the goals that we've just worked on.
All right, Councillor Spoon?
to rise above the political games and the circus and remember that we are here to work as a team to do the work of the city.
Right. Oh, I think there's some common themes there. You guys are committed to serving your community. I hope you feel really good about this process. You guys have done some really great work together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it comes to fruition the next time I come through Canby to see how you guys are implementing these goals. I'll be working with your staff team to get this report together for you and hope to see you guys adopted at that meeting, not the next meeting, but the following meeting. And just appreciate your engagement and your participation in the process. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a closing comment for me, if I might. First of all, I want to thank Sarah for your excellent work and for sticking with us. Really appreciate you working us into your schedule and kind of on a little bit of a shorter notice this year. And then thank you to council. I cannot tell you how much how helpful this is to your staff to be able to have the goals clearly defined, have tangible work items that we're sure that you've agreed upon that we want to work forward on. So I look forward to working with you, council and mayor on bringing these things through the process. And, we're already on our way on some of them, but I think this is just a really helpful tool for us. And it means a lot that you did this. So just want to say thank you.
All right. Mayor, gonna call back to you to do the official adjourning.
Well, Sarah, thank you for your time and your efforts in bringing us to a conclusion. I think there are some really great things here, and I know that we've got action items I know that staff will add to get these goals achieved. So with that being said, our work session is done.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Anyone, all those in favor?
Aye.
Our work session's over. Good night, Canby.
All right.